Hello guys, my name is SVB and I'm back with another video, and today I'm going to be finishing off part 2 of my What I Learned as a GM in Plat video. And in this part I want to talk about two really important principles in Overwatch. The first being value, and the second what I'd like to call the hero trap. And I'll be talking about how these things affect particularly a rank like Platinum and also Diamond, and how these play out in games at those kind of elos. So that's the order of the day. Let's get to it, guys. So it's no secret that the different ranks of Overwatch quite often have different metas. And this is something that particularly players in lower elos complain about, that a lot of the times what the pros are playing or what the high level players are playing just isn't getting played in ranks like Gold, Platinum, and even Diamond. But there are certain heroes that are more prevalent in lower elos, and I want to talk about why that's the case. So one of the things that people talk about a lot is that there are certain noob heroes that get played in ranks like Platinum. And I think the kind of examples that people often use are heroes like Junkrat or Reaper. Now the theory is that heroes like Junkrat are easy to play, and that's why players at low elos play Junkrat, because it's a noob spam hero and it doesn't require aim, doesn't require brain. And while it might be the case that a hero like Junkrat doesn't require so much technical ability as say a Widowmaker, he has his own skill sets, and it doesn't mean that he's a noob hero. But what I've realized is that the reason for Junkrat getting picked so much is not necessarily that he's a noob hero, but it's also about the principle of value. And this is something I quickly realized when I was coming up against or with a Junkrat in my team, was that the amount of value that a Junkrat was getting at Platinum was completely disproportionate to how much value he gets in a Master game, for example. And almost the same behaviors of play, i.e. a Junkrat sort of spamming his nades into a tight corridor, that same behavior can get wildly different results in Platinum and Master. People in the sort of Platinum and Gold area, and this was at least my experience, often didn't really change or adapt their behavior depending on what they were facing, particularly if it was something like a Junkrat, where they were still trying to go through narrow chokeways and narrow points on the map, even if they knew that there was a Junkrat, and even if they knew they were likely to get spammed. So it isn't necessarily that Junkrat is a noob hero and that's why Platinum players play Junkrat, but it's that Platinum players don't respect Junkrat, and I'm going to get to this idea of respect in a second, but they don't respect the Junkrat, and therefore they often just walk into areas where mines are likely to be, they walk into the nade spam, they walk into the traps, in a way that people at Masters or GM or the higher ranks of Overwatch just don't. And the same can be said for a lot of heroes, Reaper being another example where people don't tend to deal with him very well. And this is something I've had a lot of main tanks complain to me, that there's just Reapers everywhere, nobody can deal with them, and they're just getting spammed to death by this Reaper in their face. And this is largely true. It is definitely a problem where people don't deal with the Reaper. But while a lot of you might hear this and think, well, yeah, that's why people are in Platinum and not in Master, because they're not good at dealing with enemy threats. And there's an element of that. However, I'd also like to put on top of that. And that goes back to the idea of respect. And what I noticed playing in Gold and Platinum was that there are certain heroes that get a lot of respect. And what I mean by respect is essentially, you look at a hero, you understand the threat that they pose, and you adapt and change your behavior to deal with the potential fatal danger that hero poses to your team. And if we were to compare Junkrat and Reaper, for example, I think two heroes that would be great to compare them to would be Pharah and Widowmaker. Now Pharah is the perfect example of this, I think, because before Brigitte was put into the game, Pharah was pretty much the most hated character amongst the lower heroes of Overwatch, because particularly when paired with a Mercy, she could be incredibly oppressive, and obviously at Platinum and below, hit scans often had a hard time dealing with her. And people have a hard time dealing with Pharah at all ranks when she's pocketed by a Mercy, but it was particularly dominant at lower elos. Now what this has meant is that there's a residual fear in the community of a hero like Pharah, and I noticed in my games that just the presence of a Pharah in the enemy team was enough to severely scare my team and get them to panic and really try and almost overreact to the Pharah pick. And people gave the Pharah so much respect that they wouldn't give to a hero like Junkrat, for example. And actually at Platinum, people give too much respect to Pharah, because even if the Pharah isn't actually doing a lot of work, I noticed that if my team was losing to an enemy team with a Pharah in it, it was automatically because of the Pharah. And this is an experiment you guys can check in your own games. Next time you're in a game and your team is losing to an enemy team with a Pharah, see how quickly it takes for your team to start blaming the hit scan, and then the tank player will get tilted and switch to Widowmaker on top of that, because at the end of the day, people feared the Pharah. And the same can be said of a Widowmaker, where just the presence of an enemy Widowmaker is enough often to get your team to tilt, essentially, if they're not being dealt with. And I'm sure it's not an unfamiliar story to any of you about a Widowmaker popping heads and just tilting a team that's on the receiving end, and everybody's flaming each other for not dealing with it properly. DPS blaming the tanks, tanks blaming the DPS, healers blaming someone, someone blaming the healers. But essentially, the point I'm trying to make about all this is that these heroes get respect. Their mere presence is enough to change people's behavior, even at Platinum, and people understand that these heroes pose a unique threat that requires a unique approach to deal with. Now, Junkrat and Reaper, for example, don't get this respect, and that's why I think a lot of teams have issues dealing with heroes like Junkrat and Reaper, and that's why heroes like them get picked much more often than they do in a higher elo. And this is one of those invisible skills that's part of the ladder experience, but that no one really talks about, is that on top of things like positioning, game sense, and obviously technical ability, you also have to learn to respect the certain pick of a certain hero on the enemy team. So if there's a Widowmaker, you don't peek the angles. You make sure that you're always behind cover, and wherever you're shooting or wherever you're positioning yourself from is out of line of sight of the Widowmaker. And then for a Junkrat, for example, you don't go into a narrow corridor. You don't go into a tight room where he can spam you easily. You go into open areas where it's difficult for a Junkrat to get value. Essentially, the principle is that you shouldn't challenge a hero in their most optimal zone. And this essentially leads me on to the next part of what I want to talk about, which is the idea of the hero trap. And I kind of realized this from a funny incident where I was in a game, and it was on Numbani. On point C, one of the players on my team, the Ana, started getting tilted because we didn't have a Reaper on our team. They were in chat begging, like, please, someone pick Reaper, please, please, please. Now, eventually I picked Reaper, more than anything just to shut her up, because managing your team is also a part of Overwatch. But as I played Reaper, obviously I realized that I was able to get more value from Reaper than I would at a higher rank because of the things I've stated here. But what was funny about that exchange was that at a higher rank, you would probably get flamed if you picked Reaper at a GM level game, because his value is suboptimal. And again, this principle of value is so important, because theoretically at a higher elo, a higher skilled player could get more value out of a Widowmaker or a Tracer than they would with a Reaper, because fundamentally at some point, playing Reaper relies on the enemy team allowing you to get in close, allowing you to deal damage to the front line without doing something about it. And I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of people I notice are stuck, because this forms a sort of hero trap. Because suddenly when you were in Platinum and you were getting flamed for not picking Reaper, say you were picking Tracer, now you've climbed your way to Diamond or Master playing Reaper, and now you're getting flamed for playing Reaper, because theoretically he's not an optimal pick at that rank. And this obviously isn't exclusive to Reaper, he's just a good example of this. And this essentially provides a sort of conundrum. If you're at Gold, Platinum, do you pick the high skill ceiling hero that essentially, in the long term and in the higher ranks, can get more value should you be a master of this hero? Or do you pick the heroes that get the most value in your rank and are the most likely to actually get you to climb from your rank? And I think most people pick the second option, because no one wants to lose SR, everybody wants to gain and climb as fast as they can. But the reason that this is a trap, essentially, is that having this narrow hero pool, or this quote-unquote suboptimal hero pool, and of course, what's optimal is always changing. So I'm not saying that you should only learn a certain set of heroes, but there are a certain set of heroes who can be sort of crutches at a lower elo and abandon you at a higher elo, and you won't understand why. Now, the two heroes that come to mind as the worst offenders for this would be Roadhog and Moira. Now, I've talked about Moira a lot, and I don't want to give the impression that I somehow hate Moira, so I'm just going to focus on Roadhog to try and explain what I mean by this. So Roadhog is another hero who has a tiny pick percentage at higher elos. You are much more likely to come across Rhine, Zarya, Winston, D.Va players, and even Orisa players than you are a Roadhog player. And the reason for this is twofold. So first of all, Roadhog, I would say, is the best mistake punisher in the entire Overwatch roster. And it all comes down to the hook ability. Now, the reason the hook is so powerful is that essentially it's an insta-kill on an 8-second cooldown, provided you can land it, and it's not significantly hard to land. If you compare how difficult it is to land a Widowmaker headshot to a Roadhog hook, you'll see why it's so easy to get a value out of a hook compared to a high skill ceiling hero like Widowmaker. Because it's the perfect ability to punish people who are out of position, and at ranks like Gold and Platinum, people are often out of position. So for that reason, Roadhog is incredibly good, but of course, the higher you go, the less likely it is that people are out of position and are making errors like that, so your ability to land a hook severely diminishes, and therefore getting value out of a Roadhog becomes significantly harder. So that's one reason he's picked less. But the other reason is that Roadhog is an incredibly deceptive hero, because he can make you think that you're doing a lot when you're actually making it harder for your team. Now, because of his toolkit, Roadhog is an incredibly self-sufficient hero. He's got a huge HP pool and an ability to self-heal that also reduces damage, and this means that most Roadhog players tend to play in an incredibly undisciplined manner, and they'll take risky positions because they know that their self-heal can bail them out should they get spotted by the enemy team, and they can afford to eat a couple shots with their large HP pool. So if you're playing Roadhog and you decide to go on a semi-flank and you're sort of halfway out of position from your team, you take a couple right-click shots, you do a bit of damage to the tanks, nothing that kills them but enough to do a bit of damage. That raises your damage stats, so you're likely to get the gold medal. Then they spot you, they start shooting you, you turn around, you press the button to take a breather, and you start racking up points for healing done as well. And maybe if you do it enough, you might even get silver healing. But essentially all you've done there is make life harder for your team. Because by going out and poking and doing damage that doesn't actually lead to a kill and healing yourself, all you've done is build a lot of ult charge while giving the enemy team a lot of ult charge. And this is something that a lot of players do in Overwatch. It's a big mistake that players make in Overwatch. And Roadhog is just the most exaggerated example of this. You can do this with pretty much any hero. But the reason Roadhog is particularly bad, the ult that you get for yourself is Whole Hog. And in the tier list of Overwatch ultimates, Whole Hog is fairly low down. It's not an amazing ult, it's not really an ult that's going to swing a fight. Now, compare that to example, if you went out there, you poked the tanks, and now you've helped the enemy Zen build a Transcendence, you've helped the enemy Ana build a Nano Blade, you've helped the enemy Zarya build a Graviton because she was able to beam you, and you've helped the enemy Genji build a Dragon Blade because he hit you with a few shuriken. If you were to look at this from the top down, you'd look at it and think, okay, so this Roadhog has just traded Whole Hog charge for ult charge for a bunch of better ultimates than his. And the Roadhog player in that scenario is almost throwing. But when you're in game, these things are incredibly hard to see for yourself. And that's where the stat system lies to you, because you'll look at it and you think, well, I've got gold damage, I've been sitting on the point, so I've got gold objective time, and I'm doing a lot of self-healing, I haven't died as a consequence of my self-healing, so how is it my fault? But in reality, this behavior and this inability to look at how your actions affect your team and the enemy team in ways beyond just doing damage, you start to realize that you can quite quickly get into horrendously bad habits of Overwatch that the stat system will reward you for, but that the game will punish you because you're more likely to lose your games as a consequence of what you're doing, but you'll still look back at the game and think, well, I did X amount of damage, I didn't deserve to lose. And again, this is not exclusive to Roadhog, guys. You can do this with pretty much any hero if you poke a lot and take a lot of needless damage. And essentially, the principle to remember is that doing a lot of things is not the same as doing a lot of things for your team. You can be busy, you can be doing a lot of poke damage, you can be doing a lot of healing, but it doesn't actually mean you're doing what's best for your team. And I've already spoken about before how Moira can do this, but another example is Lucio, where you'll see a lot of Lucio players spend almost all their time wall riding around, looking for big boops and trying to one-on-one the enemy DPS. And for them, and maybe even for anyone watching, it looks like they're doing a lot. Oh, that Lucio's wall riding around and he managed to boop someone off the map one time, therefore he must be getting a lot of value. In reality, spending all game looking for that one boop, or just wall riding around being a nuisance but not actually helping your team, is akin to throwing. Because what's the actual primary purpose of a Lucio? To speed their team around. And if you're not with your team as Lucio, then you're just throwing. You're just basically costing your team the game. Because again, you're not getting the value from your hero. If you're going to wall ride around and flank and boop, just pick Tracer and Sombra and actually just do the job of a DPS. Don't occupy the support slot and then not actually support your team. And unfortunately, the problem with the medal system, and I don't blame Blizzard for this particularly, because it's incredibly hard to come up with a way of actually showing players what's good and what's not, because what's good and what's not depends entirely on the context of the game. But the medal system, and the on-fire system, and the little red skull, all these things are designed to give you instant gratification. They're designed to give you that good feeling of, I'm doing something, when in reality you can often be doing the absolute opposite. You can actually be making it harder for your team. And this is where, guys, I'd encourage you to try and get out of the hero trap, because a lot of people get stuck playing heroes that provide this instant gratification, particularly in the lower ranks, but they won't give you that same output at a higher rank. because people have learned to outsmart that style of play. They've learned to punish that style of play. And just an example, going back to Moira, I know I bash Moira a lot, guys, and that, again, that's not to say that Moira is a bad pick. It's just that right now, with the way the game is balanced, there's very few scenarios where you would want to pick Moira over a different healer because of the idea of value and how much value you can get. So just to provide an example, you might be someone who picks Zenyatta out of spawn, and as you're pushing in with your team, you get jumped on by the enemy Genji and you die really, really easily because Zenyatta is probably the squishiest character in all of Overwatch. And again, I fully understand that it's less likely at lower elos that people will peel for you, but sometimes going through the struggle of getting dove on and dying is part of the process of learning how to play that hero better. And that's part of the process of grinding through ladder. Because if you go for the option of instant gratification, if you play the short game, and if you look only at the, oh, this team is not helping me, this team sucks, and then you go to spawn, you switch off to Moira, and you find that the gratification is a lot better now. You find that should you get dove on, you can suddenly Wraith to get out of trouble, you can drop a healing orb to heal yourself, or you can drop a damage orb to damage that DPS that's jumping you. And it's a lot easier to get value than it is out of the Zenyatta. And I don't want to paint the picture that I'm saying never do this, because of course, if there is a particularly oppressive Genji who's dominating for the enemy team, it's a perfectly viable and smart strategy to go and switch off to a Moira who counters him and shut that Genji down. However, if you abandon that Zenyatta, who's a challenging hero, but a potentially rewarding hero, if you abandon that Zenyatta at the first sign of trouble, essentially all you're doing is forcing yourself further and further to play that safety hero of yours, which in this case is Moira, because like I said in my GM and gold video, it's so easy for her to get value and get all the gold medals, even if what she's actually doing is harmful to the team. But when you look at the bigger picture, a high-level Zenyatta will have learned to deal with flankers a lot better than someone playing Zenyatta at Platinum. And that doesn't happen by accident, that happens through training and through bad experience. That happens through getting dove on repeatedly and eventually learning the patterns of the enemy divers enough times that you actually start to land orbs in their face. And if you're a Zenyatta who can actually handle themselves and can actually kill enemy divers as often as you die to them, you're now providing your team with so much more value, because all of a sudden there's a Discord orb in every fight, there's a healing orb with much further range than a Moira can heal, and now you've got a Transcendence which can counter any ultimate almost in the game. You can pick Moira and you can feel like you're dying less, and when you get those kills, you suddenly feel like you're carrying your team, but then that Graviton Surge comes in, 5 of you are caught, and you get wiped because you don't have a defensive ult to actually counter that Graviton Surge. And that's where Overwatch is deceptive, guys. Because it's not always the things that reward you instantly that are the things that are going to win you the game. The instant reward would come from picking Moira and being able to kill the Genji much more easily than you would a Zenyatta. But the thing that swings the game is having the Transcendence when your team needs it, and from learning to be able to deal with flankers as Zenyatta. The same goes for tank players in general. And I know that a lot of you complain to me about the frustration of being a Reinhardt, for example, and taking all this damage and dying, only to have your team not do anything about it. And believe me guys, I'm a main tank player, I understand what you're saying, I understand the frustration. But you might get instant gratification swapping off to Roadhog, or swapping off to DPS, going off getting a kill, or getting some gold medals in your belt. But when the team actually needs to move through the choke, and when the team actually needs protection, they're not going to have any, and that's the thing that's actually going to swing the game. Not you doing 10,000 amounts of poke damage with a Roadhog. Because in reality, Overwatch sometimes is about taking the hit for your team. Sometimes it's about sacrificing yourself for the team. And this is hard in solo queue. I don't expect that you should all go out there and just die for your teammates all the time, because no one's going to play like that. There's plenty of games where I myself am just like super frustrated and I just want to do my own thing because my team is incompetent. But in general, the real value is not just from the things that are happening on your screen, it's from the things that are happening in the game. So again, doing a lot of things is not the same as doing a lot for your team. And this is why I advise all of you to not fall into the hero trap. Don't necessarily play the heroes that reward you instantly. Try and play the heroes with a bit of a long game in mind. Try and play the heroes that reward your team, and also that sometimes reward what you could be doing if you had enough practice with that hero. So my final word of advice to you guys is don't be afraid to practice heroes, particularly when you're in the lower elos. And this is no disrespect to elos like silver, gold and platinum, but at these elos people are making mistakes all the time. So if you pick a hero that you want to be good at but you're not good at, these are the ranks to do it, because you can make mistakes and they won't instantly cost your team the game. Everybody to a certain extent is learning their heroes at this rank. No one has achieved mastery of their hero at Platinum. But if you shoehorn yourself, if you fall into that trap, and now you're climbing, you got to Diamond, you got to Master, and now you don't have a hero pool. Now you're stuck playing Moira, and your teammates are flaming you for playing Moira. Your teammates are flaming you for playing Reaper, because at this rank, they're not optimal, or with this comp, they're not giving the value that they could be doing in a different hero. By that point, it's too late. You either play the hero that isn't going to give value, and you make it harder for yourself, or you switch to a hero you don't actually know how to play. So don't be afraid, guys, of going through the pain of learning that new hero. Because the hero you like can always find value in certain situations. You can always still find certain times to pick Roadhog. You can always still find certain times to pick Moira, to pick Junkrat, or any other hero that might fit in this trap category. But you need to go through that grind with the heroes you're bad at to ever get good at them. And this is not just me giving you theoretical advice, it's not just me saying go do it and I'm here laughing it off playing Reinhardt all the time. I've gone through this with several heroes, and arguably I'm going through this now playing DPS and sucking. So to cut the long story short, guys, don't be afraid to lose. I know that's a weird thing for me to say, because I'm here trying to help people get better at Overwatch and help win more. But winning in the long term involves losing sometimes in the short term, and going through the bad experiences of getting caught out of position, getting caught on your own and dying, so that you learn to never do it again. So that's all I got for today, guys. I hope you found this video helpful, and hope you're finding this series helpful. I know a lot of these videos have been focused on mentality and things beyond the game, but I think those are often equally important attributes to what makes a good Overwatch player. And Overwatch isn't just about clicking and standing your character in the right position, it's also about how you approach the game and how you think about the game. So hopefully these videos were able to help some of you guys with the mental aspect of Overwatch. For those of you who are after more specific stuff, don't worry, because I will be doing a couple of VOD reviews next. So if you want some specific ideas on positioning and maps, they'll be coming very soon. And again, I'd like to give a big thank you to all my patrons. Thank you to my new top patron Zulez, and to the other new patrons whose contributions I really appreciate. And I do give preference for VOD reviews to my patrons, so you'll be seeing a couple coming up from the people who've been generous enough to support me. And as always, please do like, share and subscribe, because that's another form of support I really appreciate from you guys. You've all been amazing. And I'll be back soon with another video. See you guys soon.